So we started life as environmentalists, and about 15 years ago we started to wear ties, and then about 5 years ago we dropped them because it was just a dumb idea anyway. It's a stupid piece of clothing, but there we go. That's but Shamir was right. We've grown up as a professional from being the environmental conscience to creating contributions to business and actually saying environment's not enough, sustainability, you can't do environment without sustainability, you can't run a business without sustainability if you're going to run a business in the 21st century. And this is where we're developing the profession. We have 14,000 members in 100 countries around the world, most in UK, that is true to say. And I was struck by some of the other professional bodies who can measure things. Some of the stuff that we talk about, I'd love to be able to measure it. How do you measure ethics, for example? And that's the challenge. But you can be a profession. You can be a professional. So here's the kind of things that I'm going to be talking about. I was very conscious going through my journey this morning on the delayed train from East Midlands. Actually, a lot of things I'm talking about are the antecedents that create things like modern slavery. So why have we got to this point? And actually, it's not just modern slavery, because if we crack modern slavery, it'll be something else that comes along where we all point at ourselves and say, this is shocking, we have to do something about it. And we continuously pick up those lots of isms and things that we have to address as business and professional people. So sustainability is about stepping back and looking at the long-term trajectory of your business, understanding the risks and opportunities, and then doing your business in a way that we feel comfortable as human beings and also professionals. That's what I'm going to be talking about a little bit. So, this is a really good slide because you can't see it, so you just have to trust me that in terms of what's on here, and we are going to have to pick a different slide. We produced a couple of documents a few years ago. One was the perfect storm. In effect, the world is going to change. And whether you know this or you don't, the world is going to change. And your business is going to change. My guess is your business is changing, or at least the things happening to your business are changing. Well, the question is, how quick are you to be able to understand that and be able to respond to that? By the way, that's what I would expect a sustainability professional to do, is to bring that thinking to your business. So the first thing to mention here is climate change. Climate change gets blamed for almost everything. If there's a terrorist attack, there's a climate change person in there saying it's because of climate change. And arguably, you can track it back to some point. But I was struck by a documentary I saw not so long since, and it was talking about an African village that was sustainable. It used to grow its own food. It had its own local economy. Everything was fine. Actually, as the climate's become hotter, the land has become more arid. They're unable now to grow their own food supply and survive. Young males in that village stopped having a purpose. So they would walk out and they would find where their purpose is, whether it be jobs, whether it be a contribution. And actually that's where terrorism comes in. Because terrorism, whether we like it or not, gives these young people a purpose. Actually, that's where some of these issues come. When we talk about modern slavery, you can make your own connections to that as to how people get into this situation and how it's very easy to manipulate people to be in this situation. Second one I want to mention is population growth. So we are about to see 2.5 billion people more on the planet in the next 25 years. That's the equivalent of the city the size of Birmingham every 5 days for the next 25 years. That's going to happen in the world. Now, if you're a business person, you think, fantastic, I've got more people to sell to. That's absolutely right. You should be thinking in that way. But it's going to disrupt how you run your business too. And what you should be thinking is, how can I adapt my business to be able to respond to these changing paradigms, I suppose. With more people, you need more food. Well, I've just mentioned that you're probably going to have less land to be able to grow that food on. You're going to have to sell more stuff. If you sell more stuff, you're going to need more resources. Okay, we have a finite amount of resources. Where are those resources going to come from? Well, actually, most of them we dump in the landfill. So, okay, there's a resource there that we can use. So it's thinking differently about how your business operates. And of course, energy supply, all those kind of good things will I'm sure would exercise your mind. This is, I think, one of my favourite graphs because this demonstrates how and why the world is changing at the rate it is doing. So whether you believe in climate change or not, as to the reasons for it, actually this graph gives you a little bit of science as to why. I'm not sure you can see the words on that one. But everything goes swimmingly across there. So what we're looking at things like population, CO2, loss of tropical rainforest. All that goes along at a normal pace to about 1900. At the same point, motor vehicles come on stream, water use starts to be increased. And then there's another significant increase around about 1950. Now, this is where population's starting to explode. And these are the things that will absolutely change your business. Your job is to understand how and why. Interestingly, there's a new line on that graph, which is the number of people in modern slavery. And you can see it's following the same trajectory as well. So I did say it was going to be high level here. One of the things that we've been encouraging people to do is to think how they run their business, not what they do, but how. And that's where our professional people come online. Then you started to look at what's the role of business. It's an odd question, really, when you start to dissect it. Initially, it was there to create wealth, and we've got very good at it. But it's a single entity purpose. Moving forward, I think we have to re-examine the role of business. So 80% of the antecedents leading to climate change come from what business does. Okay. What we're seeing is the rewards and the wealth generation from business is actually starting to become much smaller. It's starting to create wealth for a smaller number of people. And that's creating inequality. And one stat in the UK from 1970s, the amount of profit being taken out of business and given to shareholders is the amount of profits increasing. The salary levels at that same point have been decreasing. So it's creating inequality. And when you've got inequality, you're starting to see some of the kind of social disruptions that we're witnessing around the world now. My view is, or our view is, in AIMA, that the role of business has to re-examine itself and it has to better understand its relationship with the environment and society in order for us to create a sustainable economy. That's where our professional people come along. So, sustainable development. It's lovely to hear some of the professional bodies talking about sustainable development, and I think we're all talking about it to some degrees. And actually, although AIMA, it's a profession of ours, it's for everybody. Even people coming through schools, it's something we have to teach people now. That it's no good to throw things in the bin or to manufacture stuff that you end up throwing into the bin once you're finished with it. It's the rights and responsibilities of our future generation. You can read the slides there. I'm not going to talk about this. I'll start to focus a little bit more on the human values, the ethics and the quality of life. And all of this, of course, is this great system, this circle that we're talking about of the economy and some of the antecedents I mentioned previously leading to modern slavery. And what we're trying to get to here is to resolve sustainability, not trade off. It's okay burning carbon if I plant a few trees over here. Well, okay, really, that's great. I'm glad you're thinking that way. But actually, if you re-examine how you're doing your business, then actually there might be different ways about not using carbon. Because if you don't use carbon, you don't have the energy costs. And you can still do it. And there's loads of examples of how businesses are doing that. So, here is, I don't think this will be new to you. So if you look at global business and the supply chain, globalization is one of those mega trends where we're getting very good at it, particularly with technology now giving us access to data and information and access to people all around the world. It means we can trade all around the world. As we do that, the trading becomes much more complex. And actually we start to lose sight of those supply chains. And what we're doing is we're getting access to the resources, and we're perhaps not quite sure where they come from, but that's okay because we've got the resource. The other thing that goes with that is governance starts to break down, because the complexity of doing business is really quite tough on the governance models that you put in place. What this will do to your business, if you don't understand how your supply chain is, the impact on the ethics, all the things that you've been hearing about this morning, we're putting at risk your brand. Investors in particular are now asking for your policies on social, economic and governance models. Interestingly, they're also asking businesses on where your businesses have failed. And that gives them a test, because if you don't know where they failed, then actually you're probably paying lip service to these kind of policies. And we're also seeing an increase in litigation. So where governments do get involved, then that's set to increase. So there's two sides to that. One is the mandatory side. There's a 65% increase in mandatory legislation for mandatory reporting, but also there's a 35% increase in voluntary reporting. And it's on transparency. That's where companies work beyond a standard rather than working to a standard. So, as you can see here, here's some things that companies should be doing. The big thing here is due diligence. And if a company doesn't bring things like modern slavery into their governance systems, then arguably it's not addressing it properly. And you know, the comments that we're hearing here today will always be a trite comment from a company that will make, because that's what CEOs do, that's what we do, because we want to tell people that we're good at these things. But actually, when you start to look at two other areas in their business, you start to get a feel of how seriously they're taking this. So one is their governance and their policies and their due diligence associated to that. The second thing is the skills. Do they have a professional person looking at this in a professional way? Or is it something that will hand off to a communications team because they look after brand, or a marketing team because they're the one that's trying to get more business? Those kind of indicators give you a little insight into how a company is addressing things like modern slavery. And the other thing to think about is about the ability to report deficiencies. You can see there that I've used a slide. If I just go back one, this is courtesy of CLT Law. We've done some webinars for us, speaking very coherently about actually how companies have been caught up in this, how companies have been able to demonstrate that they are addressing things like modern slavery, albeit it's not perfect. But actually the intent is there. These are complex things. These aren't things that you can solve with just a single action and activity. This is hard work, and it will take collaboration to be able to achieve these things. So here are some of the things that we've done as a professional body, and I think there's a theme developing around, listening to myself and the professional bodies about the potential to collaborate stronger. We can all have our own versions of what modern slavery is, but I think we're missing a trick if we do that. So we define what corporate sustainability is, and that's thinking broader. Some of those antecedents that I've mentioned. This is a guidance document about purchasing, procuring. Clearly there's a blind side here. It's not necessarily about your cheaper option, it's about a sustainable option. It's an interesting slide. I could make some comments on this actually, but I think I better not. But you can see how procurement and sustainable procurement is starting to grow up a little bit more now. This is about putting value and cost on things. Over the weekend, I was looking into the what is called the Sheffield Tree Massacre, where it's just easy to take trees down because they cost money, and actually nobody's balanced that decision making with the value that trees create as capital. Again, these aren't easy things to measure. Again, guidance document here, and as you can see, very grateful to CLT Law for providing us with some guidance documents, but also there's a series of webinars on the website. Interestingly, anybody here will be able to access those. If other professional bodies want to use those and present those to their members, then by all means feel free to come and talk to us later. But my guess is this is not answered by a series of publications such as this. This will be a constant dialogue about how businesses are addressing things like equality and sustainability, and also particularly modern slavery. Here's our commitment. Delighted to see that the appetite for collaboration is stronger now than I've ever known before, and is also getting stronger as well. And to be fair to the construction industry, you know, we do beat ourselves up at times about the things that we do, but we do some bloody good stuff as well. And, you know, whilst we may not be perfect, you know, let's be fair to ourselves, let's be realistic here. There's nobody out there got an answer. It's just a matter of, let's be realistic and let's be honest about what the problem is as well, too. So, summary, I suppose the final point is, for me, there's a very strong thing about ethics, and I've heard that all through some of the other professional bodies as well, and that's absolutely right. There's a thing about skills. You know, addressing things like modern slavery is very difficult without that professional person, and a professional person getting access to professional advice through like professional bodies and other bodies such as that. I think that's really key. And I suppose the last thing is, when you boil all of this down, regardless of whether we're professional, we talk in our corporate kind of language, don't we, about doing this stuff. We're all very serious about it. At the end of the day, it's about our own personal values. You know, we're all very good after the event. Hollywood's got their own problem at the minute, and everybody's very good at saying how bad this is. You know, for so long we've turned a blind eye to things like this. You know, and there will be a succession of these things that will come out on a regular basis. Wouldn't it be really neat to say, you know what, this is really hard work, and I ain't going to answer, but you know what, we're going to have a go at this. Let's have a go at this. And even better, let's share our learning with people around us. Let's share it through the professional bodies and through everybody else. I'm not just talking about professional bodies. Now, that would be a really neat thing to do. And at that point, the voice of the expert then goes back to the policy makers, the legislation makers, and actually drives change and drives transformation in a way that I don't think legislation on its own will ever be able to do. Thank you very much.